When one thinks of the Qin Empire, or even ancient China, the first image that comes to mind is the world-shocking terracotta army. And this magnificent army reflects the invincible military machine that swept away 6 rival kingdoms and unified China. One could say that China's very existence today as a unified nation is built upon the myth of this legion's invincibility. But with the sudden collapse of the empire after the first emperor's death, this myth was shattered. And at the Battle of Julu in 208 BC, a miracle of warfare occurred. A peerless hero led 50,000 men to crush a Qin army of 400,000. After this battle, the Qin army was no more. The Qin dynasty was no more. A year earlier, the collapse of the great Qin Empire seemed inevitable. After 2 impoverished farmers raised the banner of rebellion in Xiang, a tidal wave of revolt instantly swept across the realm. The common people, crushed by Qin's brutal laws, rose up, killing local officials and seizing granaries. Chaos reigned. And for the old aristocrats of the 6 kingdoms so recently conquered, this was the perfect moment for revenge. In a very short time, nearly all of the 6 old kingdoms had been restored. East of the Hanggu Pass, it seemed, the land no longer belonged to Qin. However, no collapse happens overnight. While the once mighty empire was weakened by its rigid rule and bloody political infighting, its backbone, the Qin army, unleashed a final astonishing burst of combat power. The old Qin warriors would not go down easily. As a rebel army of over 100,000 peasants surged into the heartland, an unexpected figure emerged in the capital, Xian'an. His name was Zhang Han. He was not a professional soldier. He was the minister of the palace treasury, the emperor's chief financier and architect. With the rebels closing in, Zhang Han made an astonishing proposal. He requested to pardon the hundreds of thousands of convicts and slaves toiling on the first emperor's mausoleum, and to arm them for battle. This was an act of profound irony. One of the main reasons for the chaos was the dynasty's relentless conscription of labor to build this very tomb. The harsh Qin laws had turned countless ordinary people into criminals, who were then marched to this bottomless pit of labor. In a sense, the mausoleum and the ant-like masses toiling beneath it were the ultimate symbol of Qin's tyranny. And now, these very ants were being asked to fight to the death to save the empire that enslaved them. Was it even possible? In Chinese history, such a scenario had played out once before. When a rival army approached the capital of the Shang dynasty, the Shang armed their slaves, only to be met with a mass betrayal on the battlefield. The dynasty fell in a single day. What would happen this time? As it turned out, the idea wasn't the problem, it was the man executing it. The desperate court agreed, seeing it as a way to buy time. But no one expected what came next. Under the command of Zhang Han, and critically, led by a corps of professional junior officers from the regular Qin army, this mob of convicts and slaves was forged into an army of death. Twice, he led them to victory against the peasant rebels. Bolstered by the arrival of some regular army units, the emperor put them all under Zhang Han's command and sent them east of the Hanggu Pass to crush the rebellion. Zhang Han did not disappoint. This cobbled-together Mausoleum Legion was invincible. He shattered the main rebel force, defeated 7 other rebel generals, killed the rebel leader Chen Sheng, conquered the revived state of Wei, and killed the king of Qi. Then, at the Battle of Dingtao, he defeated and killed the commander-in-chief of the Chu army, Zhang Liang, the most accomplished general among all the rebel forces. Finally, he smashed his way into Handan, the capital of the Zhao kingdom, and cornered the king of Zhao in his last stronghold, the city of Julu. By 208 BC, just 1 year after the rebellion began, the resistance had reached its darkest hour. If the Mausoleum Legion of convicts had already pushed the rebels to the brink, the next piece of news plunged them into suffocating despair. The Great Wall Legion had arrived. Without understanding Qin's military deployment, it's hard to grasp the weight of these words. The Qin Empire had 3 main armies. One was the capital garrison. Another was the Southern Army, sent to conquer the regions south of the Yangtze. And the third, the most elite of all, was the Great Wall Legion, permanently stationed on the northern frontier in Juyuan Commandery. Their mission was singular, to defend against the fierce Xiang Yu cavalry of the northern steppe. For 9 years, this army had built the Great Wall, honed their tactics, and fought the nomads. They possessed the Empire's most powerful crossbows, its strongest armor, and its richest experience in open-field warfare. At its peak, it numbered 300,000 men. Even after reductions, it still fielded over 200,000 elite soldiers. The Great Wall Legion was, arguably, the most powerful army on Earth, and its current commander was a man named Wang Li. In the Qin military, the name Wang meant victory. Wang Li's grandfather, Wang Jian, had personally commanded the armies that conquered 3 of the 6 kingdoms. His father, Wang Ben, had conquered another 2. The Wang family was the soul of the Qin military. They had buried 5 of the 6 kingdoms. So, in Wang Li's eyes, this rebellion was nothing more than the last dying embers of a fire his family had already extinguished once. When the summons finally came to march south and put down the revolt, he did not hesitate. He force-marched his army, traveling light. They carried only essential combat gear, racing down the straight road that led to the capital. The heavy equipment, armor for the heavy cavalry and infantry, powerful crossbows, siege engines, artisans, and provisions, would follow later. Eager for battle, Wang Li arrived at the front. But to his shock and fury, he discovered that Zhang Han, the architect, had been appointed supreme commander of all Qin forces. This meant that he, Wang Li, a third-generation general from the most revered military family in the empire, had to take orders from a glorified bean counter. But the laws of Qin were absolute. He swallowed his pride, determined to win a swift and glorious victory to reclaim his rightful place. And that glorious victory was waiting for him, right in front of his eyes, Julu. Now, Wang Li led his army, a force born for slaughter, south into the heartland. Their goal was clear: to join forces with Zhang Han's Mausoleum Legion and utterly annihilate the rebellion at Julu. In the winter of 208 BC, the city of Julu became a city of the dead. Wang Li's 200,000-strong Great Wall Legion surrounded the small city. In desperation, the Zhao defenders poured water down the city walls. In the freezing winter wind, it instantly turned to ice, creating a slick barrier the Qin soldiers could not climb. Lacking his heavy siege engines, Wang Li settled in for a long siege, using the city as bait to draw in more rebels. As expected, reinforcements from the other rebel states arrived. But when they saw the black-clad legions of Qin, when they saw the great banner bearing the name Wang, they all stopped. Fear. A deep, bone-chilling fear. No one dared to attack. They simply built their camps and watched as the city of Julu slowly starved. But then, just as Wang Li was preparing his final assault, disastrous news arrived. His decision to force-march his army south had been a strategic blunder. With the main legion gone, the northern frontier was left exposed. The Xiongnu had seized the opportunity, swarming over the border and reconquering the northern territories. This meant that Wang Li's heavy equipment and the vast stores of grain stockpiled in the north were now completely cut off. This created an absurd situation. His 200,000 elite soldiers were now stranded. They had no heavy armor for their cavalry and infantry, no siege rams to break the walls. And most critically, they had no food. Fortunately, they still had Zhang Han's Mausoleum Legion. Zhang Han controlled the Ao granary at Xin'an, the empire's national food reserve. Despite the chaos, this strategic granary still held enough grain to feed the 400,000-strong Qin army. But this meant maintaining a fragile supply line from the granary to Julu. The distance was over 300 kilometers. The only viable option was to transport the grain by water. And here, we must understand a crucial piece of geographical history. Unlike its course today, 2,200 years ago, the Yellow River flowed directly through Xin'an, where the Ao granary was located. From there, the river ran northeast. This created a perfect aquatic highway. Grain from the Ao granary was loaded onto barges, sailed downstream on this ancient course of the Yellow River, and then transferred into its tributary, the Jiang River. This route took the supplies directly to a place called Jiyuan, less than 50 kilometers from the front lines at Julu. From Jiyuan, the grain was simply transferred to wagons for the final leg of the journey. The final 50 kilometers were the only part of the journey that needed protection. And so, a stalemate formed around Julu. The besieged city was the epicenter. To the north, a combined rebel army of 400,000 men watched, too paralyzed by fear and disunity to act. Wang Li's Great Wall Legion formed a tight ring around the city. To the south, a contingent of Zhang Han's Mausoleum Legion, perhaps 100,000 strong, guarded the supply line. And Zhang Han himself, with the main body of his army, held the critical transport hub at Jiyuan. Both sides were waiting for the other to make a move. The move finally came. The besieged king of Zhao had sent desperate pleas for help to the king of Chu, the nominal leader of the rebellion. Though still reeling from their recent defeat, the Chu army was the strongest among the rebel states. The king of Chu made a crucial strategic decision. He split his forces into two armies. The first was a smaller force of only a few thousand men, led by the newly ennobled Liu Bang. Taking advantage of the fact that the main Qin armies were concentrated at Julu, his mission was to march west on a long expedition to attack the Qin heartland of Guangzhong. Even if this audacious campaign failed, it would serve as a vital diversion, drawing away Qin's attention. The second, the main Chu army, was composed of 50,000 battle-hardened veteran soldiers, tasked with marching north to relieve the state of Zhao. The commander-in-chief of this main army was Song Yi. The second in command was the slain General Xiang Liang's 23-year-old nephew, Xiang Yu, and the third in command was the king's own substitute father, Fan Zheng. But the commander, Song Yi, was a talker, not a fighter. He marched his army to the city of Anyang and then simply stopped. We will never know if it was because Anyang was perilously close to Dingtao, the very place where the great General Xiang Liang had been defeated and killed by Zhang Han, that filled Song Yi with a paralyzing fear of facing Zhang Han himself. But whatever the reason, in a rescue mission where speed was everything, he held his army at Anyang for a staggering 46 days. Xiang Yu, burning for revenge against Zhang Han, repeatedly pleaded for permission to advance. Song Yi not only refused, but issued a chilling order. Anyone who was fierce, disobedient, or glory-seeking would be executed. Xiang Yu, unable to endure it any longer, conspired secretly with the third in command, Fan Zheng. They found their perfect moment. Song Yi was hosting a lavish farewell banquet to send his own son off to the state of Qi to become its new chancellor. At that very moment, a torrential rain began to fall. Amidst the freezing cold, stuck in this strategic limbo, the army's already low morale was now a tinderbox ready to ignite. Xiang Yu stormed into the command tent, beheaded Song Yi, and announced to the stunned soldiers that he was acting on a secret order from the king of Chu to execute Song Yi for plotting treason with the state of Qi. The soldiers erupted in thunderous cheers. Then, while Fan Zheng dispatched a messenger to inform the king of Chu, Xiang Yu immediately marched the army with great speed toward Julu. After crossing the Yellow River, Xiang Yu's army reached the banks of the Jiang River, with Julu visible on the other side. The young general ascended a high point and surveyed the battlefield. And with his innate military genius, he immediately spotted the massive flaw in the Qin deployment. As we said, Wang Li's Great Wall Legion was starving. Every grain of rice they ate depended on Zhang Han shipping it from the south. To protect this fragile lifeline, Wang Li deployed the Great Wall Legion's signature creation, the Great Wall itself. Along the 50-kilometer supply route, the Qin army constructed a Yongdao. This was a covered way, a fortified road flanked by earthen walls and wooden palisades specifically designed to defend against cavalry raids. And just like the Great Wall, It was equipped with beacon towers and mobile units, allowing for a rapid response to any harassment along the line. It was like an umbilical cord, connecting Zhang Han's base to Wang Li's siege. This was a highly effective system, honed over years of fighting nomadic tribes, combining both transport security and instant communication. The only problem was, their enemy now was not the Xiongnu. In fact, this fortified road was the most obvious target imaginable. But the 400,000-strong Allied army did nothing. No one dared to break formation and attack it. They knew that a solo, deep strike would inevitably be met by a pincer attack from Wang Li's Great Wall Legion and the Mausoleum Legion troops stationed south of the city. Why stick their necks out? But Xiang Yu was fearless. He immediately dispatched his fiercest general, Yingbu, and another commander with 10,000 Chu cavalry across the Jiang River to launch a series of devastating raids on the fortified road. The Chu cavalry's combat discipline, siege experience, and efficiency far surpassed that of the Xiongnu. Under Yingbu's command, they employed multi-point harassment tactics, their goal not to annihilate, but to disrupt, harass, and sever the transport. This dense, multi-pronged assault quickly overwhelmed the defensive capacity of the Yongdao's garrison. Yingbu knew a massive Qin counterattack was imminent. He knew his 10,000 cavalry, with their backs to the river, could be annihilated. He placed all his hope in his commander-in-chief, believing he could persuade the Allied armies to launch a coordinated attack. But he was wrong. Xiang Yu never even attempted to contact the other feudal lords. He didn't have the time, and he certainly didn't have their trust. Who would obey a 23-year-old junior general from the Chu army? Just because he was the nephew of Xiang Liang, the grandson of the great General Xiang. So Xiang Yu wasted not a single moment on these futile communications. He led his remaining 40,000 Chu soldiers across the Jiang River. And then he gave an order that would echo through Chinese history. Pofu Chenzhou. He commanded his soldiers, "Sink all the ships, smash every cooking pot, burn all the shelters. Each man is to carry only 3 days' worth of dry rations." Xiang Yu was telling his own soldiers and the Qin army across the field, "We have no retreat. In 3 days, we will either be eating in the Qin camp or we will be corpses on this riverbank." From the moment Yingbu's cavalry began their raids, the battle on the banks of the Jiang River became a bizarre spectacle. 10,000 cavalry attacked a fragile earthen fortification, repeatedly charging, breaking through palisades, setting fire to structures, then retreating to regroup. Then charging again, retreating just before the enemy's rapid response force could arrive. They were not without losses. The powerful crossbows of the Great Wall Legion exacted a price for every charge. But the narrow battlefield of the fortified road worked in their favor, preventing the Qin from bringing their full-ranged firepower to bear. And surrounding this small battlefield, nearly 800,000 soldiers were watching. Among them, 300,000 Qin troops were frantically redeploying, freeing up mobile units to launch a decisive counterattack on this small cavalry force trapped against the river. Another 400,000 Allied rebel troops had finally begun to move, cautiously advancing their positions to the flanks of Julu, occupying high ground and building temporary fortifications to watch from afar. And on the banks of the Jiang River, 40,000 Chu soldiers anxiously watched as their comrades were ferried across. Time passed in this tense dance of maneuvers. By the time Xiang Yu's 40,000 men had fully crossed the river and mobilized for war, they joined the returning cavalry, formed up for a full-scale assault, their backs to the water. The history books do not record the thoughts of the other rebel generals, only that they watched from the ramparts, Zuobi Shangguan. They watched from the safety of their newly built fortifications, a phrase that would later become a Chinese idiom for standing by and doing nothing while others fight. Of course, their inaction was understandable. From a tactical perspective, the 50,000 Chu soldiers had walked into a death trap. Their retreat was cut off. In front of them, the fortified road was still partially intact, and most critically, the Qin had finished their deployment. While Wang Li's main force remained engaged, the nearly 100,000-strong reserve force from Zhang Han's Mausoleum Legion, stationed south of Julu, had now arrayed for battle. 100,000 Qin soldiers against 50,000 Chu soldiers who had just force-marched to the battlefield. Everyone knew what was coming, but everyone underestimated the Chu, and everyone underestimated Xiang Yu. Before the Qin could fully deploy, the Chu army, led by Xiang Yu, fell upon them like a pack of starving wolves. The battle began. A brutal, ferocious clash erupted along the fortified road. The histories record that every Chu soldier fought as 10 men. This was not a literary exaggeration. Trapped with no hope of retreat, the Chu army unleashed the absolute limits of human endurance. Most of them were men of Chu, burning with hatred for the Qin who had destroyed their kingdom. Old hatreds, new desperation, and the raw instinct for survival turned them into killing machines, oblivious to pain. Their war cries shook the heavens. The histories say, the sound was so terrifying that the horses of the other rebel armies dared not even neigh. Once, twice, 3 times, 9 times, the two armies clashed in brutal, head-on combat, and 9 times the Chu were victorious. This was the legendary 9 victories in 9 battles. Every Qin counterattack was personally repelled by Xiang Yu. Zhang Han's once invincible Mausoleum Legion was broken. Imagine the scene. On the cold, desolate riverbank, tens of thousands of Chu soldiers roared amidst a mountain of corpses. Each time you thought they would collapse from exhaustion, they rose again, screaming, fighting beyond all physical limits. Xiang Yu himself, leading his elite cavalry, charged again and again into the Qin formations, driven by a vow of vengeance. This giant of a man, nearly 2 meters tall and strong enough to lift a ceremonial bronze cauldron, was a demigod of death. Covered in blood, he fought on and on. In that moment, Xiang Yu was not a man. In the eyes of the Qin, he was a war god, clawed up from the depths of hell. The 100,000-strong Mausoleum Legion, undefeated until now, had never faced such a suicidal battle. They were psychologically shattered by the ferocity of Xiang Yu and the Chu army. They broke and fled south. And only then, when Wang Li, who had assumed Zhang Han's legion could handle the fight, realized the battle was lost and tried to send reinforcements, it was too late. Zhang Han's army was in full retreat. And now, the other feudal lords, who had been watching from the safety of their fortifications, finally saw which way the wind was blowing. They swarmed in from the flanks, cutting across the fortified road, following in the footsteps of the Chu army, and completing the total encirclement of Wang Li's Great Wall Legion. When the battle on the riverbank was over, the other rebel generals came to pay homage to Xiang Yu. The records of the grand historian gives a vivid detail. They crawled on their knees into his command tent, not one of them daring to look up at his face. At the age of 23, Xiang Yu had become a legend. He was now the supreme general of the feudal princes, the commander-in-chief of the entire rebel alliance. With the supply line severed and its relief force shattered, Wang Li's Great Wall Legion, still surrounding Julu, was now utterly alone. They had no food, no reinforcements, and their morale had hit rock bottom. And now, the Supreme General Xiang Yu waved his command baton. This time, it was not the Chu army fighting alone. The full 400,000-strong rebel alliance, now under his unified command, after a siege of several days to wait for Wang Li's army to starve, descended upon the remaining Qin positions like a tidal wave. The Great Wall Legion, the army that had once made the Xiongnu tremble in fear, was annihilated in a storm of hunger and steel. Several generals were killed or committed suicide. Their commander, Wang Li, was captured. Half of the Qin Empire's military might had just evaporated. But the war was not over. The Qin commander-in-chief, Zhang Han, still had over 200,000 men, now retreated to Jiyuan. The balance of power had shifted, but he was not yet defeated. Xiang Yu gave him no time to rest. For the next 4 months, he hounded Zhang Han's army. 3 times Zhang Han tried to outmaneuver him, and 3 times he was utterly defeated. All Zhang Han could do was retreat and defend. He still had a steady stream of grain coming from the Ao granary. He was waiting for reinforcements from the capital, or at the very least, an order to retreat. But the messenger he sent to the capital was kept waiting outside the palace gates for 3 days. He never even saw the emperor or the chancellor. The messenger escaped back to the front and delivered a single, chilling message. Whether you win or lose, you are a dead man. The commander who had once swept across the land finally broke. In the summer of 207 BC, near the ruins of the ancient Shang dynasty capital of Yin, Zhang Han surrendered his army of 200,000 men to Xiang Yu. By a strange coincidence, the last time a slave army had betrayed their masters and decided the fate of a dynasty was at the Battle of Muya, not far from this very spot. Militarily speaking, the Qin dynasty died on this day. Some histories say that Wang Li was taken captive, but given Xiang Yu's personality and his deep-seated hatred for Qin, another version is more likely. It is said that Xiang Yu personally executed Wang Li. It was a sacrifice to the spirit of his grandfather, Xiang, the last great general of Chu, who had been killed by Wang Li's grandfather, Wang Jian. It was the ultimate revenge of the Chu aristocracy against the Qin generals. But the flames of revenge, once lit, are hard to extinguish. The 200,000 surrendered Qin soldiers became Xiang Yu's nightmare. Though disarmed, they were still men of Qin. As the Grand Army marched west, the Qin soldiers began to whisper among themselves, fearing that if Xiang Yu failed to take the capital, their families back home would be executed by the Qin government. The rumors reached Xiang Yu's ears, and so, on a dark night, south of the city of Xin'an, the Chu army struck. The 200,000 unarmed Qin prisoners were driven into deep pits or slaughtered in their sleep. It sounds like a horror story, but it is real. In 1912, when workers were building a railway near the ancient site of Xin'an, they unearthed a mountain of human bones. It was a mass grave, 400 meters long and 250 meters wide. The skeletons inside were piled in layers, twisted and broken. This was the proof. On that night, history's definition of Xiang Yu would be forever changed. No longer just a war god, but something else. The Overlord, the title he would later choose for himself. The Battle of Julu ended with the complete annihilation of the Qin army. Xiang Yu, in the most brutal and direct way imaginable, had shattered the seemingly indestructible shell of the Qin Empire. He had proven that if you dare to burn your own escape route, if you dare to look death in the face, nothing is impossible. But he did not win the world. The courage he showed at Julu made the other lords fear him, but the cruelty he showed at Xin'an made the world despise him. And why he buried 200,000 men alive is still debated. But there is one reason all agree on: he was in a hurry. Because just before this, the small diversionary force led by the low-ranking officer Liu Bang, the man sent west with only a few thousand soldiers, had already marched into the Qin capital of Xianyang.